Which begs the question, is Lisa Rinna the modern day Eve Babitz? Let's discuss. Hi, I'm Charlotte, and I read Lisa Rinna's memoir because I am having Trader Season 4 withdrawals. When I started this memoir, I did not expect to have anything in common with a Beverly Hills actor and TV personality, but I was pleasantly surprised to find that I felt weirdly seen throughout many points in this novel, because it turns out Lisa Rinna is just a f***ing girl. In the prologue, she writes, "Why would I be writing another book? Why is now the time? From my signature lips to God's ears, I have a lot to say about being a woman." And she does. I felt like she really genuinely wanted to write this book. It didn't feel just like a celebrity cash grab memoir. I felt like she had a lot to genuinely get off her chest. And at one point, she even talks about how she doesn't normally enjoy the process of writing a book because this is not her first book. But that just made it feel even more genuine to me because it felt like she really needed to put this book out. I will say, if you're someone who's just here for the Bravo drama, you might be disappointed. Personally, I feel like leaving a 1-star review on a nonfiction memoir where one of the major topics that's covered is the author grieving the recent loss of their mother is just a little harsh, but that's just me. To me, this book is about who Rinna is beyond her time on RHOBH, and she even spells it out in the prologue that this is not a sordid tell-all. So if you read that and then continued reading and were disappointed, I think that's on you. Maybe this person just skipped the prologue, but I mean, to be fair, she was being a little bit clickbaity with like luring people in with the promise of talking about housewives drama, but she did warn us from the get-go that that would not be what the book is on the whole. I would say that this passage from the prologue basically sums up but I still feel like my fans don't know all of me. There's Rinna and there's Lisa. They know the Rinna who wigged out on Kim Richards and smashed a wine glass on the table in front of her in Amsterdam. Metaphorically wigged out because that was my real hair. They don't know the Lisa who was in a fog of despair over the loss of her mother during my last year on the show. Not that grieving excuses everything I've done, but I've been through fire and ice to get to where I am today. Some might even say I started some of those fires, and you know what? I own every bit of it. In recent years, Own It Baby has become my new thing. Why haven't I trademarked that yet? Siri, voice note. Get contact info for Attorney to the Stars Marty Singer. So yeah, she's basically using this book to clear the air about some of her actions on RHOBH, but more than that, she's bringing fans deeper into her inner world and also cracking jokes along the way. And I would say this book is for the Rinna fans and also for women facing the realities of growing older. And in truth, I don't like getting older, but that's the reality, baby. So I'm trying to figure out what to do with it. How do we make the best of the stage in life? Just because I'm a certain age doesn't mean I'm supposed to put myself out to pasture. More than one person has said to me, "Why don't you step aside and let your daughters be in the spotlight now?" Because I'm not in competition with my daughters, because there is room for all of us at every age to take up space. She ends the prologue with, "I'm going to reveal a lot of things and share stories that I hope might ultimately help anyone reading this book and at the very least make you laugh. This is my motivation and my true reason for doing what I do. If my story can help other people, it's worth it. I think of this book as a gift to not only you, my fans, but to me. And I promise it's a hell of a lot better gift than a stuffed bunny. Just ask Kim Richards." Overall, throughout the book, there is a kind of tone of like, this is Lisa Rinna's first time on Earth, if you know what I mean. But I think she has a genuine heart, and that's more than a lot of people can say. So I did let a couple things slide, and I do think that she's pretty funny. So chapter 1, she starts the book with talking about the recent passing of her mother and also the passing of her father 6 years ago. Her father was actually one of the people in America who died from assisted suicide because of Oregon's Death with Dignity Act, and her mother died after spending a week on hospice. And so, not that there's ever a non-complex passing away situation, but those are just two very complex ways to say goodbye to your parents. She does say that she feels grateful that she was able to be with both of her parents at the end of her life, which I agree is something very special. She also shares the story of how before she was born, her mother was kidnapped by a serial killer and hit in the head multiple times with a hammer. But luckily, a policeman had a suspicion about the car that the kidnapper was driving and had followed the car and was able to intervene and save her mother's life. And so this is why we saw on the Traders reunion that she was deeply upset by Colton using the word hostage in a more lighthearted situation than what the word actually conveys. And she also tells the tragic story of her half-sister accidentally overdosing when she was 21, when Rinna was only 6 years old. So she talks about, of course, because of the generation I grew up in, I did all the inner self-work, I did all the therapy, and I came to understand generational trauma. I subscribe to the philosophy that when someone has that kind of trauma and you are birthed from it, you come out of the womb dealing with that trauma subconsciously. Then eventually it comes out consciously in your life. I think she should give herself more credit because I think a lot of people of her generation actually did not get the necessary therapy that they needed. So I think it's impressive that she speaks about therapy a lot throughout this book and how that's helpful to her. But here is the first time she brings up one of the main themes of the book, which is that you never know what someone is going through behind closed doors. And I do think that that's always a nice thing to keep in mind. So basically, after her mom passed away, she started filming the last season of RHOBH 3 days later, which is just crazy. If this was me, I also absolutely would have acted out and then needed a whole entire book to explain myself. Because that is just so wild. So she goes on in the book to express resentment towards the network and towards her coworkers and co-stars for not helping her through this difficult time and instead pressuring her to just continue with filming. She specifically calls out Andy Cohen for him being unhelpful. And then at the Traders reunion, she had to sit not 5 feet away from him. And I felt like she handled herself so well. Confrontation fears Lisa Rinna. But yeah, she's basically explaining some of her questionable moments that she had in her last season on the show and processing that stuff retroactively in the book. And something that I really loved was that she talks about how leaving the show raised her vibrational frequency, and that was one of many times that she surprised me throughout this book because there's just so many layers to her that I wasn't expecting. And I'm glad that she's on a higher frequency now. Chapter 2 was about her non-linear journey to her current success, which I found very comforting as someone navigating my mid-20s right now. Even Lisa fucking Rinna did not have a clear-cut path to success. She reflects on her childhood. She was unfortunately bullied as a child, which affected her relationship to her inner confidence. And she did theater, she loved fashion, she loved shopping. All those things were present from an early age in her life. She goes on to talk about her early love life. She talks about how when she first got into Emerson College, her and her current boyfriend at the time moved to Boston together all the way across the country, and they were there for all of 3 days before she freaked out and got homesick and asked for her security deposit back and came back to the West Coast, which is so deeply me coded. And this was probably the biggest time that I felt seen by her. But anyway, she moved back home. She spent some time modeling, and then she did eventually find her way back to acting. That was what she was hoping to go to college for. But she found her way there. She did try and fail many times to land a role. And while she was in this period of trying to land a role, she met her husband, Harry Hamlin, while she was working part-time at an eyeglasses store in Bel Air, which is just so random, and I love it. So she eventually auditioned for Days of Our Lives, and in between the initial audition and the callback, she cut her hair drastically short, which apparently they always tell you not to change your appearance in between auditions, but she did it. And she says, every time I've done something that everyone tells me not to do, it always produces something good, because she obviously ended up booking the role. Then she shot some movies and eventually landed Melrose Place, which is a role that she's very proud of. Overall, I really enjoyed this chapter as a behind-the-scenes look into Hollywood as an up-and-coming actress in the 90s, which begs the question, is Lisa Rinna the modern-day Eve Babitz? Let's discuss. Okay, chapter 3 is about her clearing up the drama on Housewives. I could feel a deep desire for her to just be her authentic self in this chapter and just put everything on the table. And it didn't feel like it was coming from a place of needing approval. It was just kind of that she wanted a record of her side of the story out there so that she could always come back and point to it and be like, no, this is how it happened, but I'm just moving on with my life. That's how it feels to me. Like, she's just putting it behind her. She wants her truth to be spoken, and now she's ready to move on. I did not grow up watching Housewives. I'm not an avid Bravo girly, so this chapter wasn't that interesting to me. But if you want to go find her answering her most asked questions about her time on Housewives, then feel free to go read it. The next chapter, chapter 4, is about her long and happy marriage with Harry Hamlin. She's very proud of how long lasting the marriage is, because this is something that's more rare in Hollywood. She talks about what they have in common as actors, how they navigated her being on reality TV, and just their strengths and challenges as a couple. She shares the story of how Hamlin starred as the leading man in the movie Making Love in 1982, in which he was playing an openly gay character, which was unheard of back then, according to her. I did not double check, but I believe it. And he was actually blacklisted for years after shooting this role, but he just felt like it was something that he needed to do. So she commended his bravery for that role. And she said that to this day, people still make claims about him being gay and her being her beard, which is just really something. And I'm sure very tiring to deal with it, but she honestly just seems to laugh it off, and she handles it well. And my favorite part of this entire book happens in chapter 5. She talks about when she would come home from shooting Housewives and feel very exasperated with her co-stars. Her husband would get out a copy of the literal DSM-5 and turn to the exact page that explained the personality disorder she was up against, which I find hilarious. It's like the opposite of gaslighting. Like, he's like finding scientific reasoning for why her coworkers might be acting in a frustrating way. If he wanted to, he would. If he wanted to, he would have a copy of the DSM-5 on hand and pull it out to back up your... Chapter 5, she talks about the ups and downs of motherhood and the unique challenges of raising Nepo babies. That's what she calls them. Okay. And she talked about how one of her daughters had a rare pediatric illness called PANDAS, pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorders associated with streptococcal infections, which is something that is, I guess, rare. I hadn't heard of it, but it was very hard for the whole family. And this was happening while she was filming RHOBH. And she feels in retrospect that her coworkers were also not supportive about this struggle in her life, but she's grateful that it was dealt with separately from the show because her family could just handle it in private. Another good quote from this book is that she says, "My girls call me Mom, not Lisa, at least to my face. Whatever, they can call me anything they want. Just don't call me before I've had my first cup of coffee." She also says that she wants her future grandchildren to call her Grandma, which I love. I haven't heard that one before. And she refers to the current president of the United States as the circus peanut in chief, which I also haven't heard before. I kind of doubt she came up with that, but I did like that as well. Chapter 6 is all about how important fashion is to her. As I mentioned, even as a child, fashion was something that was very important to her. So she's been saying how it's been really exciting to work with more high-end designers now that she is no longer on Housewives. She said that it's hard to get designers to work with you when you are on a TV show where you kind of have to act a little impolite in public sometimes because they don't want clips of women wearing their dresses to be like flipping a table in a restaurant, which makes sense. But now that she's left the show and her vibration is high, she's getting all these collabs, and she was even on the runway. So love that for her. And chapter 7 is about her endeavors as a businesswoman. I'm not someone who's really interested in running my own business, so I don't have a lot to say on this chapter, but her and her husband did have a couple different business endeavors together and separate. They had a clothing store somewhere in LA at some point. If that's interesting to you, feel free to read chapter 7. Chapter 8 is about being in her 60s as a woman in Hollywood, being on hormone replacement therapy, going through menopause, and all that fun stuff. And she talks about how she was the oldest woman to ever be on the cover of Cosmopolitan. I think the issue was called something about sex after 60s or something like that. And she was very proud of that accomplishment, as she should be. I would say one of the plights of the modern woman is convincing society that you still have worth even as you get older. So shout out to Lisa Rinna for helping us fight that fight within Hollywood and breaking some glass ceilings over there. And then chapter 9 is about her plastic surgery journey. She obviously has a very iconic look to her, and she has worked hard to earn this look. And she said she's not embarrassed about anything. She'll talk openly about anything. She talks about what specific procedures work for her and what she recommends. And she says something along the lines of, because her job is to be on screen, she thinks that it's her duty to upkeep her appearance, which is an interesting take on plastic surgery that I hadn't heard before. And she was like saying that she's thankful for all the modern day technology that women today in the industry have access to, because women decades ago didn't have access to being able to like upkeep their appearance, and back then that led to their careers being cut short a lot of the time. She also talks about maintaining her physical fitness, which is something that I love to see as someone with a degree in public health. I think it's very important for all of us to be maintaining our physical fitness, and especially aging women do have some unique changes in their bodies that should be tended to with physical activity. At some point in the book, she did call herself a walking contradiction, which is apparent even within just the things that she says in this book. For example, she does talk about trying to be supportive about eating disorders at one point, but then in this chapter, or in chapter 6, she's talking about Sutton from Real Housewives, and she says she has a weird body. And then in this chapter, she's clearing up the fact that she has never had an eating disorder, because I guess there's been speculation about that. And she says, yes, I eat tacos. So this is kind of like what I'm talking about when I say that it's feels like it's her first time on earth. Like, I don't think that she has much wisdom beyond her circle of life experience. But as I said, she tries her best to be a compassionate person, and I have to give her credit for that. For example, she also talks about having money troubles in the book, which could be totally valid, but I just don't think the average person wants to hear about a TV star having money troubles. But again, she's really trying her best, and she's trying to be a nice person, which goes a long way for me. And I also think if you take a housewife's memoir off the shelf, then you need to align your expectations with what is going to be said in the book. Because if you expect it to be nothing but based, I do think that's on you. Chapter 10, Own It, Baby. She explains that her iconic line on the show has kind of become her life philosophy. To her credit, I do think she owns a lot of her public mistakes in this book. Again, I'm not an avid Housewives watcher, so take this with a grain of salt. I don't know the perspectives of the other women involved in any of these incidents, but if you would rather hate on this book because of the minutia of the drama of the Housewives show, then pay attention to the deeper takeaways that Lisa's offering about her existence as a woman on this planet. Then I feel like we're just reading the book for different reasons. And now we've reached the epilogue of the book. She says that her current goal is to get back into acting. She says that she would love to be on a limited series such as White Lotus. And Mike White, if you're watching, please make it happen, because I feel like if she was given the right role, she could totally bring a lot to one of the future seasons. I would love to see that. She says she loves overposting on social media, so she will continue to do so, but her 2 rules are not posting about Trump and not posting about Bravo, which love that. It feels like she's very serious about having a clean break from Housewives. She's pretty determined to not go back to that world, which I think is a great choice for her. And there was something in this season about Traitors where one of the housewives that was getting kicked off the show in that episode said something about, maybe I'll see you at a Bravo reunion, and she said, no, you won't. I was like, maybe they have beef. But no, turns out it was Lisa's beef with the show in general. And she ends the book with, as any reality star worth a lick of salt says on their way out the door, you haven't heard the last from me. And I really hope that we haven't. Overall, this book was surprisingly profound to me. I felt weirdly seen by her meandering career path and some of the struggles that she faces as a woman. I was pleasantly surprised by her talking about her vibrational frequency and trusting in the universe. And I will have a newfound appreciation for her carefree dancing videos on Instagram. I hope that I can be that confident one day. And she said this book was a gift to her fans, but I also think it was a gift to fans of the Traitors franchise, because presumably the reason she was on the show, and maybe even the reason she was a traitor, was so that she could have more promo for her book. I don't know if that has anything to do with how they would choose a traitor, but I feel like she wanted more publicity for the release of her book, which came out right around the time of the finale. And I just feel like we would not have had such an iconic season if Lisa was not one of the traitors. So thank you, Lisa Rinna. If anyone wants to discuss Traitors Season 4 in the comments, I would love to talk about it. I have been scouring the internet for any trace of a book recommendation or a favorite book from Rob Rausch, and I cannot find anything. Unfortunately, I think he's too busy wrangling snakes to read a book, which is totally fair. But if he ever does give a book recommendation, just know I will absolutely be making a video talking about it. So subscribe if you want to stick around and hope that that will happen, or if you want to hear about any of my other future reading endeavors. Thanks for watching.